Welcome to the Podium Proof F1 podcast. My name is Frank Alessi.
And I'm David Alessi.
The 2022 season is behind us. 23 is coming in hot, and we are here for it. Tonight, we're going to just run through each team and discuss kind of what we want to see from each of them, what would be a win for them, and what we not only what we want to see, but what we expect to see, what we think is going to happen. You know, whether they're going to move forward, take a step back, and just kind of have some fun with it and spitball with it. You know, I mean, we haven't even seen any of these cars on track yet this year. So, you know, this is all just kind of based upon, I guess, the trajectory that they were heading in last year and whether we think the issues that they had were easily or, you know, attainable off-season fixes.
Yeah, and it'll be kind of aside from the trajectory they were on, kind of looking at, there's been a little bit of a mix-up here, a little mixing it up with team principles. There's been, driver changes. So kind of just taking all that into consideration with where maybe, where we think they might end up going this season. And hell, we're probably going to be dead wrong on a few of them, but what the hell, we'll give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
We'll so I mean, we'll go through that.
Well, that's what way too soon predictions are for.
Yeah, and we'll talk about, we're not going to get too deep into like the car releases. We'll touch on them. There's a few of them with some things that we specifically want to touch on, but for the most part, things are going to change. I mean, the liveries may not, or maybe they will. You kind of never know. A couple of the cars that have been released thus far, you already know that they're going to change. Hell, the Red Bull, Christian Horner has already made it pretty clear that the car that we see at testing will be different. I think as we saw last year, that's very possible for a lot of teams. So we're not going to spend too much time dissecting the cars. Maybe we'll talk about some obvious changes that they had and some livery stuff. But for the most part, it's going to be looking at the team and performance and kind of what we expect, what we hope, what we think is going to happen.
And as of this recording, it is everyone has released except for Ferrari, Mercedes, and Alpine.
Yes.
Ferrari's tomorrow, Alpine and Mercedes are the 15th, I believe.
No, I think Mercedes is the 15th, Alpine is the 16th. I think it's one each day for the next 3 days.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Which, when by the time this comes out and gets put on the YouTubes, Ferrari and Mercedes will have released. So, we can't comment to those, but yes, by the time this gets released, they will have come out. So those will just have to wait till another episode.
I would expect their liveries to be the same. Ferrari, go with freaking gloss paint.
Gloss pink, huh? It's not very Marinello-ish.
Gloss paint.
Oh, I thought you said gloss pink.
Not pink. Paint.
Okay.
Gloss paint. I'm tired of this matte bullshit.
Dude, it would be cool to see. Like, not as a whole season thing, just kind of like as a one-off from Ferrari. Yes, Ferraris are red, especially Ferrari race cars. But you also see Ferraris in yellow and the occasional white.
Mm-hmm.
How badass would just an all-white Ferrari F1 car look?
All white and black.
Yeah. I think it would look killer.
It would look pretty sick.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be game for a yellow one too. I think we discussed that once before, maybe multiple times.
Yeah, somebody had done a rendering of it.
Yeah.
When they did the yellow suits at where was that, for Monza? No. Where was that at this past year?
Yeah, it was Monza.
It was Monza.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked about that. We've seen renderings of how that would look. Killer. I think a white one would look good too.
It would just be a cool one-off.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I think it would just be more. I think I'd like it more just because it's something different, right? Like, look, don't get me wrong. I love the red. It's Ferrari red. Like, it's iconic. It's everything. It's awesome. But just something different is always nice, you know?
Mm-hmm. Like the Red Bull when they ran
They
I
ran
forget
the
what it was
white
for.
one.
The white
Yeah.
livery.
Yep.
Dude, that was so good. That looks
God, that
so
was
freaking
awesome. Yes.
good. But
Where was it that they did that? Yeah, because that was.
I can picture it. I can picture the
Yeah,
track. That was
it
one.
was reminiscent of the
Also,
legendary Honda RA272. It was in Turkey, Pt.1 Turkey. Yep.
all right, real quick, man, before we get going here, what are you sipping on tonight?
I am. Let me finish off this little warm up pour. I have got a very, very new to me and special bottle that I'm going to crack open.
Ooh.
And that is, if I can turn it right for the camera, a bottle of Weller Foolproof. This was the first Virginia ABC lottery bottle that I have ever won. I've gotten so used to getting those emails of thanks for your entry. Unfortunately, yours was not selected due to the insane amount of entries for hardly any bottles.
Right.
But dude, I got a different email this time. I almost didn't.
Whenever you texted me, I thought it was a scam. I thought you were getting hosed.
Like, look, I would
delete that thing quick before it gets all your info since you opened it.
Right.
I'm pretty jealous of that one, man. Ooh, good one.
That wasn't bad. Now the only part, which I shouldn't say the only part, none of it hurts. I freaking won a bottle of Weller Foolproof at MSRP. Like, that's pretty freaking awesome. However, in the same lottery that this was in was the bottle that I would probably sell a kidney to get because I want one so bad, which was the Old Forester birthday bourbon.
Ah, yeah.
Love me some Old Forester. God, I want a bottle of birthday bourbon. But, you know, there's always next year, right, Coach?
That's right.
So we'll let this open up a little bit, let it breathe some, and then I'll get into it.
Cool.
Oh, it smells good.
I am also cracking open a bottle.
It's a strange looking bottle.
I have been chomping at the bit for this one, and it's sitting here in front of me, so I peeled all the stuff off earlier. But this is, we're going a little Scotch tonight. This is a bottle I've been sitting on for a little while. I figured, hell, we'll kick off the new season with cracking this one. This is the Dalmore 12-year. Pretty cool freaking bottle, too.
It is, yeah.
And they have another one that I'm going to be buying next. The Dalmore Cigar Malt.
Oh, I bet that's good.
That I'm going to try that one before I buy it because it's a little pricey. Let's see what we got here.
Man, those.
Boo.
Ooh.
That was not a good one.
No. Man, I've heard nothing but good things about really anything, any bourbon or scotch that's like a cigar blend,
I know.
such as
Joseph
the
Magnus,
Joseph Magnus.
quite possibly the
That's
best
still
bourbon that I've ever tasted.
that's still on the unicorn list. I look forward to the day I find one of those.
Got the old king cake tray tonight.
Oh, check that out! I didn't even catch that earlier. Hell yeah,
Like just like a king cake, huh?
yeah, it does.
Oh my god.
Man, it's funny. You walk into a store up here and they got king cake.
Really?
It's like y'all bunch of posers. Like, look, I mean, it's
Think
it's
it- like
it's terrible king cake, but
that
guess
thing
what?
can't be fresh.
Yeah, it's terrible king cake, but it's better than no king cake, right?
Is it?
I mean,
When
yes
you
and
know
no.
what real king cake
Yeah,
is?
yeah, that's the problem, right? Like, I know what good king cake
Although,
is.
but like you say that, but dude, they still got people here that like these Dong Fong king cakes. They go stand in line for them and, you know, wait hours
Mm-hmm.
when they got, I don't know, 20 places that sell badass king cakes.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, give me a Randazzo's king cake all day.
How about a
Over
Mackenzie's?
Mackenzie's. I mean, that's
I mean, that's not
original.
there anymore, but
Yeah,
yeah, I'm down with some Randazzo's.
yeah. All right. How is that?
It is very tasty.
Now, is that a Pt.1? Is that a Isla? Is that
No,
a Highland? A Space Side? What is that one?
it is
I
a
don't know enough
Highland.
about Scotch.
It's a Highland single
Okay,
malt.
gotcha.
It is. It's good. Oh, they got a QR code on this thing
Oh,
with a little
which, by the
holographic
way,
antler.
what I didn't mention was the Weller Foolproof is a 114 proof. I don't believe the foolproof is age stated. I'm checking now, but I don't see it. But who cares? It's freaking Weller foolproof.
Right?
That's gonna be one. Gotta take that bottle slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we start diving into this upcoming year, first of all, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for joining us. To everybody that's been with us last year and up until this point, thank y'all. Thank y'all very much, and we appreciate y'all being with us and sticking with us and coming back after what seemed like an eternal off season. If you haven't already, do us a favor and follow the podcast. Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. There's a QR code over there on the bottom of the screen that will take you to our link tree, which has links for all of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, as well as our website on there. And if you're catching this on the podcast, the YouTube link will be in the description. And yeah, that's about it. Housekeeping done. Appreciate y'all, and we're looking forward to another good year. You know, I think last year was the birth year of this thing. You know, I think it went pretty damn well, and you know, hoping to keep growing this thing and doing bigger and better things.
Word.
All right.
I'm just here for the bourbon.
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah. Exactly. No, it's been awesome. I enjoyed the shit out of it. And so we're gonna keep doing it. We're gonna keep rolling and keep having fun with it.
Yeah. That's the plan. Hopefully, hopefully this year we can maybe bring bring a couple more guests on.
Mhm.
We had a lot of fun when Dustin came on last time. That was really fun. Something different for us. Wasn't just us two yapping back and forth.
Mhm.
So maybe we'll try to do that this year.
Yeah.
And
Maybe do a little collaboration with another podcast or two.
yeah.
Do make it mix it up a little bit,
Yep. And if all goes well, maybe I don't know, who knows? Maybe Coda this year we can do a little something special.
Man, I would love to do an on-site.
Yeah.
We just got to figure out the Wi-Fi. That's a conversation for another deal.
Yeah, because internet, as I think we talked about last podcast when we got back from Coda last year, internet there was pretty non-existent.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. Hell, not even internet, just cell service in general was non-existent.
Right.
So, all right.
Let's get it.
Let's do this. 2023, we here. So, at the time when this podcast will get released, there will be 17 days until the Bahrain GP. And that is until race day, not until FP1. Just to clarify that. So it is quickly approaching. The week before that, we'll have testing. And let's see, testing is the last weekend of the month. So it's
only 10 days, 12 days.
Yeah. Week and a half. Is that right? Week and a half?
13
Let's
days.
See.
Well, no, that number screw me all up because that's not from today.
Yeah. It'll be 10 days roughly from when podcast is released. Yeah, 10 days. We're almost 2 weeks. We're just shy of 2 weeks currently as we're recording. So getting close, man. Getting freaking close. Can't wait. All right. Without further ado, we are going to start at the top and we'll work our way down. So let's kick it off with the Raging Bulls.
Defending champion.
Yep.
2-time driver. Back-to-back driver. And finally, they got it done in the constructors again. So,
all right, I'm gonna cut you off real quick. This foolproof, it's amazing.
I've heard it is. I've heard that's the best Weller.
Like, this is life-changing.
I've heard it's the best one.
Dude, this is, we drank the 12-year at your house, and that was good.
The 12 years fantastic.
Really freaking good. And this is a neck.
If you like proof, if you like higher proof bourbon, then that's the one.
And it's not even a super high proof. And
it's 114. It's not high by some of the standards, but that's still up there. All right, cut that out.
God. All right.
So Red Bull here.
Back to reality.
Look, man, they absolutely nailed the first year of these regulations. Ferrari also did, and then the little technical directive that came mid-year threw a wrench into that. So Red Bull really ran away with the season in a way that may be deceptive as to how much faster they actually were than their competition. Because I feel like with cost cap and the time frames for everything, and really the cost cap is the main limiting factor that held Ferrari back. It wasn't what what they struggled with couldn't be fixed in season.
Yeah.
With what they had to do.
Yeah, within time frame and budget and everything.
In terms of the aerodynamic issues that they wound up having after the floor changes.
Yep.
Well, we'll stick with Red Bull, but anyway, I would expect them to come out of the gate strong. And then, we will find out how good they really are this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And dude,
with their limitations that they have coming this year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna find out.
And that's the elephant in the room, right? The big question is their penalties from last season. The numbers and the wind tunnel time, CFD time. One, they get the least amount of anybody just because of finishing first. And then the penalty on top of that, along with the financial penalty, that's the big question, is how much, if any, right? I mean, it's Red Bull, and we know these guys know what they're doing, and they are good, and they've got some of the best.
They've turned it into a machine, dude.
Yeah. How much of a limiting factor are those things going to be to them? So I do agree. I think we're going to see them come out strong. I think it's going to be more so like mid-season and beyond, that if there is going to be any struggling due to their penalties, I think we'll see it then. I don't think we're going to see it right at first.
I agree with that completely. I think this is the year that Ferrari and Mercedes have to capitalize on Red Bull, on this opportunity that Red Bull has given them.
Yep.
Because they should be able to outdevelop them through the season.
Correct.
So it's all about where they start.
Mm-hmm.
If they start and Red Bull, is still light years ahead, and Ferrari hasn't really got on top of its problems like they claim they have, and Mercedes, maybe they clawed back some, but I mean, let's not kid ourselves about where they had a serious deficit to claw back to fight week in and week out in terms of pace.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking raw pace. They were always there to mop up on anybody else's misfortunes or mistakes. But in terms of raw pace, they had a ways to go.
Yep.
And people can say whatever they want. They had a lot of help in Brazil to get that win. So both of them too, Ferrari and Mercedes, have to capitalize on Red Bull's punishment this year.
Absolutely.
If they don't, it is going to be a long set of regulations for both of them.
Yes.
Because
100%.
As once Red Bull got a handle on their little power unit issue, that was about as flawless of a season as you could have imagined.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And man, like I don't want to jump the gun and get too far ahead of ourselves, but we're kind of on that topic of those three and whatnot. I think this year, we are going to see this year what we all have been wanting to see. As far as the battle at the front, last year at the beginning, it looked like we might have that between Ferrari and Red Bull. Obviously, reliability issues, that all got screwed pretty quickly. from one team to the next, and then it just kind of progressed downwards. But it's the first year. It was the first year of new regs, so there was bound to be hiccups. There was learning curves, whatnot. We've had a year of it, right? They've had guys dedicated to this all year long. That was their sole job. And I'm sure it's not any different than any other year. They probably still have guys dedicated to strictly this, but I guarantee you they have all made huge improvements and figured things out. And I really think this year we are going to see what we've all been wanting to, and that is a tight battle up at the front. And you said it earlier, and I do think you're right. I think it's going to be a 3-team battle, not a 2. I do think Mercedes is going to come out strong, and I think they're going to be right up there with the Ferraris and the Red Bulls battling at the pointy end.
So, man, I don't know if I'm willing to say they're going to come out strong in terms of ready to fight for wins. Don't get me wrong. I'm not putting it past them. I'm not saying that they won't. I just think that given Ferrari and Red Bull continue in their progression, not stand still, it's an awful lot for Mercedes to claw back at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they figured out some of the massive problems that they had with this design and they're able to unlock its real potential, who knows? But I think eventually it will be, I'm talking a few races in, I think will be a 3-way battle.
Yeah, yeah. Now, and one thing we saw last year was towards the end, we saw where Mercedes, and again, we'll get to Mercedes, but you know what? I'll just say this for when we get to Mercedes. I'm not even going to go down that avenue yet.
Sticking with Red Bull here, I'm going to touch on a sore subject. Feel free to weigh in, but I think that if we have a 3-team battle this year, and it's a legit battle, right? I'm talking, it's anybody's race, every race. Red Bull will finish 3rd in the constructors, and Checo will be the reason for it. They might win the drivers and finish 3rd in the constructors.
I don't disagree. I don't, because I'm with you looking at the driver pairings of their competition and the performance put forth by each of them individually and collectively.
You just look at,
I do agree with you there.
You look at the disparity between drivers, between lead driver and second driver, fastest driver, whatever, however you want to look at the numbers. The gap between Max and Checo is staggering.
Yeah.
The other two, it's what and what.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what is ultimately going to determine if that spotlight is really put on Checo is how Ferrari and Mercedes show out this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to be either the final nail for Checo, or that's going to be his saving grace. It's going to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
If they come out looking strong and really putting it to Red Bull, it's going to shine the spotlight on him, but in a bad way. Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't really have any dispute to that.
Yeah, so I mean that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. If Red Bull finds themselves in pretty familiar situation.
Yeah. Where maybe number 3 driver gets called to action, maybe
Who's actually number 3?
Mr. Danny Rick.
No, I'm saying who's actually number 3.
Mr. Danny Rick.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. But
if they start getting a little fearful of
I just meant, it's just kind of ironic how I still think they're in the same situation. Granted, I think Checo did a better job than Pierre and Albon.
mm-hmm.
I still think there's a huge gap and it could be, closer.
Yeah.
It should be closer.
It absolutely should be. I mean,
you look at these other teams, look at Lewis and George. Like,
mm-hmm.
yeah, like George is really good, but he's not the caliber of driver that Lewis is yet. I'm not saying he won't be or can't be, but going into his first year at Mercedes, and maybe he will be this year, but going into his first year at Mercedes, he was not on Lewis's level, and he beat him. And he was right there. Yeah, Lewis had more bad luck than he did, but I mean, it's that's never been a thought in Max Verstappen's head that,
mm-hmm.
man, if I don't tighten up, Checo might get me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I feel like that you need that as a team if you're going to win a constructors battle that you're not running away with.
mm-hmm.
And we all know, yeah, the fans care about the driver, but we all know what the teams care about.
Yep. It's that constructors trophy.
So it'll be fun to watch that unfold. I hope Checo gets better. I hope he tightens it up. And it'll also be interesting to see how that relationship evolves this year after a bit of turmoil last year and the way that, the season kind of ended.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I feel like Checo made a lot of, I've done a lot to help Max and all this nonsense. But to me, for starters, Formula One is a team sport. But more importantly, you're not going to be asked this day and age. You're not going to be asked to give up positions or do, I don't know, any kind of crazy team order things if you are holding your own in the championship and it's not a crazy runaway.
Right.
So yeah, you have done some things and given up some stuff to help Max, but it was never in a position it was never when you were in a position that y'all were fighting each other for anything of significance. Like last year when Checo was up there with Max early on in the season, Red Bull never asked him to do anything in terms of team orders.
Mm-hmm. No, that didn't come till later on.
Right, exactly. So, I don't buy the whole I've done a lot thing. That's your job. And let's not even act like that wasn't made very clear.
Yeah. Well, even if it wasn't made clear, let's not act like Checo didn't come into that knowing that he's the number 2.
Right.
Like, if you did, then you are just really naive.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So on the Red Bull, just for reference, here's a picture of what Red
Shocking
Bull
livery.
has released. Yeah, I mean it's wildly different. I mean, I would have never thought they'd have went this crazy and changed it up like they did.
I mean, dude, like honestly, when you nailed it, you nailed it.
Yeah, right.
Like
Why mess with perfection?
dude, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Christian Horner has made it pretty clear that the car that shows up to testing will look very different than the one they released. Shocker. So, this is one of those car launches where it's like it's just for PR purposes because they have to do a car release, right?
Right.
That's really all
That's
this
why they were the
is.
first ones.
Yeah. That is all this is. So, there you
But
have it.
I'm
The
man,
the
I'm very
2023 Red Bull RB something, I don't even remember what
19.
it is, for the next 2 weeks. That's what it
right. RB19.
Yeah. The RB19 for the next 2 weeks. There it is.
But man, I can't see the car being radically different as good as it was. Like, why would you take that kind of chance?
That's a good question. Don't know.
I mean, I didn't see what he said about it, but I can't imagine it being that different than last year's.
Yeah. And I mean, hell, maybe he's just playing a mind game. Maybe he's pulling a page out of the Mercedes book or something,
Maybe so.
We'll find out in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's your defending champs. That's our take on them. We'll see how all that shows out. But so let's move this on down. Let's take a trip out to Maranello, shall we?
Go ahead, Marinello.
So Ferrari has not released their car yet.
Tomorrow.
But looking forward to 23 as far as expectations, hopes, whatever, there's a lot of them, obviously. I think we all know the problems that they need to have overcome. And there's been some changes, some major changes at Ferrari. Fred Vasseur taking over for Mattia Binotto as team principal, which I think is going to be a fantastic thing. I think it already has, and I think it will show to have been a very good choice. But not to dive too deep because we did a lot of it last year. Reliability and strategy, decision making, right? That's what killed them last year. So right off the bat, looking into this coming year, we know that's where they need to improve. And if they can do that, then they're right there in the mix. Add on to that it has been pretty well said that they have, and I don't want to use the wrong word to allude to the wrong thing, but they have found some additional power. Whether they actually found it or they knew it was there the whole time and they just couldn't unlock it because of budgetary reasons or because they were worried about how
it was
it would
reliability
change
related.
reliability, whatever the reasoning may be, they are expected to come out with more power this year. And they've also claimed to have fixed all the reliability issues. So going on that alone, I think we are definitely going to be in for a treat at the front of the field.
I would pretty much agree with that.
If they don't screw themselves up against the great Hannah Schmitz when it comes to
So
strategies.
Look, I don't think there's any reason to believe that they haven't identified and fixed the technical issues that hampered them last year.
Mm-hmm.
The car was fantastic. It had a couple deficiencies from the floor. I can't see how those weren't identified, at some point pretty early on once they started affecting them last year in the back half of the season. They made some adjustments with the floor, and it just, like I said before, I believe the cost cap just really restricted what they were able to do, how much they were able to throw at and change this problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things, like, you can try small fixes and, hope for the best, because if you throw a ton of money at it and it doesn't work, you're screwed.
Yep.
So I would imagine this was number one on the offseason list, and they knew exactly what to do the second the season was over and the cost cap reset.
Right.
I would imagine that they had this ready to roll. The engine issues were supposedly addressed throughout the season, identified, and then, subsequently addressed for this year. So I don't have any reason to believe those won't be handled.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that it's going to come down to is Fred and how he runs this team. The engineers are there, all the technical stuff, man. Like, hell, even last year, if you just take, even despite the engine troubles, the championship would have been way closer had they just nailed all their strategy calls.
Yeah.
So, granted, you fix the on track issues, and that's why Fred's here. That's why Fred's there. You know, I mean, this happened time and time again, and Mattia could not address it and fix it. Whether he wouldn't address it or he couldn't fix it, whatever it is, it didn't get done. And there's no reason to believe it wouldn't have been the same thing this year.
Mm-hmm.
So Fred is here for that reason.
Yeah.
Make no mistake. To run the team and have it operate like a machine.
Yep.
Because when you're Ferrari, that's what it should be.
Yeah. I mean, there is no other. They don't know any other way.
Well, no, they do, but there shouldn't be.
Well, I mean, I say Ferrari as the larger picture, not, I mean, winning is it. If you're not winning, then
But you know what though, David? To a ton of fans, and I would say now it's a pretty substantial amount of the fan base, at least here in the States. They've never seen Ferrari win. So, to a huge portion of them, that's not what Ferrari does. Like, yeah, it seems like that in the record books, but, I mean, it's not. That's like, the Cleveland Browns won all these championships in a row before it was the NFL. Well, okay, does it really feel like that? No.
right. Yeah.
You know?
Well, no, you're correct. But more so, what I was referring to was just Ferrari as a whole, going back to Enzo Ferrari. Like, winning is the only answer. I was more so just speaking more generalized, just to Ferrari as a whole. That, hell, Enzo Ferrari, sold road cars to fund the racing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like racing is it. Winning is it. Like there is no other answer other than to win,
Right.
you know. So
So
that's what Fred has to do. That's granted, Enzo's not there breathing down his neck, but there's plenty of people at the Ferrari factory that are, CEOs and whatnot now that they still hold that same mentality.
oh yeah.
And that's that same expectation, and that's what's going to be expected of him. Alexa heard something I said. Yeah, so I mean that's what's going to be expected of him, and man, I'm looking forward to see what he does. I think it's going to be a good thing. I think, especially coming from outside, right? He was, for argument's sake, he was across the pit lane watching all this stuff happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he had an outsider's view of all the issues that were going on there. And I think he's probably better suited than a lot to come in and try to fix them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with that, and I feel like Leclerc is primed to have a legitimate championship run.
Mm-hmm.
We always I always like to reference this, these steps, right? Um Last year was his learning to live at the front, race in and race out. Every single one of them goes through the progressions of it. And last year was the year of him learning what it takes to fight for a championship. And Max drove almost a perfect season. Charles really made the same amount of mistakes as Max. It's just Charles was chasing most of the time, so it seemed heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And or a very similar mistake didn't wind up with as bad of a result for Max.
Yeah.
Which, like it could have easily have been. But nonetheless, Charles did make some mistakes last year, but I feel like that just kind of comes with that territory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's ready. I think he's really ready.
I agree. I agree.
And I'm also going to say this about Ferrari. They have to win this year. One of the championships. Doesn't really matter which. They have to win. Because I don't feel like there's ever been a better time for them to do it. They claim they've identified their main issues from last year in a car that really didn't have a ton of deficiencies. It was the fastest car when you're just looking at lap times that they were capable of. The Ferrari was the fastest car on the track.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it had some issues that made the Red Bull better over a race, but they're not massive things. They're just hard to fix. Like, had this been 2 years ago, or 2 years before 2020, had this been 2020, Ferrari would have thrown a shitload of money at these problems and probably had them fixed in however long it takes to manufacture parts.
Right.
And it'd have been like maybe a 2-race hiccup.
Yep.
But that's no longer the world we live in. So they have got to take advantage of Red Bull's impending deficiencies this year.
Mm-hmm.
And, whatever that is, no matter what, Red Bull will be deficient. And it's up to Ferrari and or Mercedes to expose those deficiencies.
Yep.
Because Red Bull cannot be as good as they could be. And that's where you have to make them pay. And another thing that's going to be interesting is if Red Bull is to somehow win, double it up again this year, does this penalty really deter people from breaching a cost cap going forward?
It's sure not going to look that way.
Exactly. But like, let's say Mercedes were to do it the following year intentionally, quote unquote, intentionally, not intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Accidentally on purpose.
Right. Let's say they were to do it in exactly the same way, in the same dollar amount, all that. If you're the FIA, how do you warrant a worse penalty even though you know what they did or why they did it? You can't. Because the precedent's been set. And to be honest, I've kind of felt like for the first offender of this thing that they were so adamant it was so important. We're going to defend this cost cap very hard. I kind of felt like they came down a little weak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
if nothing else, the fine that you have to pay that goes against cost cap.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been another massive hit.
Yeah.
Or not massive hit, but another hit. Teams don't give a shit about a stupid fine like that. It's not like the McLaren Spygate deal where they hit him for $100 million.
Yeah.
They felt that.
Yeah.
And they hadn't been the same since.
Mm-hmm.
That was almost like the death penalty with the NCAA that they've hit some of these schools with over the years. SMU, the program's never been the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that the Red Bull penalties come anywhere close to that. But yeah, I mean, and we've gotten into that. Let's not go down too much of a rabbit hole on that one. But
it's worth talking about because
I agree though that kind of where you had started that with saying that Ferrari and Mercedes need to expose the weaknesses that this has created for Red Bull, because there are weaknesses this has created. No matter how good they are and how
have been better
and how well they can adapt and overcome given these penalties, there will be weaknesses, and Ferrari and Mercedes need to make sure they are in a position to capitalize on them. And we know Mercedes will be there to capitalize on somebody's misfortune, but they need to be up there enough to really make it worth it. Because they capitalize once and it doesn't really change much.
Mercedes never really threatened Max.
Right. And even if they did, if it's one time, that's not doing you any good.
Right.
But if they got to get their
one lap pace
time again,
they got to get their one lap pace up.
Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't sniff the Ferraris really in qualifying either.
Yeah.
And if all the cars are closer together, that's going to be much more important.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, man. I feel like I would like to see Mercedes catch up. I feel like it's so much just to do in one season. Like I almost feel like next year would be the realistic year for a championship bid for them.
Yeah, I mean that sounds much more plausible. And I guess we'll kind of just segue this right into moving down the line to Mercedes. Um, at the same time, it's Mercedes,
Mm-hmm.
and you just don't freaking know, right? They could pull the freaking rabbit out of the hat and be killers this year.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. I mean, that could very
yeah,
easily happen.
right. Given what we know, looking at the facts, right? Looking at where they left off last season, looking at the progression that they had last season, assuming that rate of progression throughout the offseason with everybody else's progression, how much ground can they really make up? Uh, I think, do I think they're going to come out the gate challenging for the win? No. But do I think they are going to come out the gate being close enough to where Ferrari and Red Bull absolutely feel the pressure? Yes. I
I
think
think they'll be fighting for podiums right out the gate, like
yes.
legitimately.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I do think they are going to come out strong and they're going to come out swinging.
I think 1 through
And
6 will be much, much tighter.
without a doubt. Yes, absolutely.
You know, I still kind of feel like Max and Charles are going to walk away a little bit. But I feel like everything 1 through 6 will be much more condensed.
Yeah. Well, and look, here's where the gamesmanship comes into play now. Max and Charles walk away a little bit. That leaves Carlos and Checo by themselves with possibly two Mercedes right there to gang up on them and work as a team against a singular driver, right? Do I think Carlos has the potential to separate himself from Checo? Absolutely.
I do 100%.
Do I think
And he
he
showed it that
has
when the car is right, and I don't mean like for him, I just mean like when they don't have massive issues with the car as a whole,
right?
and they don't completely screw him on strategy, he's better than Checo.
Yeah, yeah. But nonetheless, if Max and Charles are kind of separating themselves, it still leaves him vulnerable to a pair of Mercedes. I think we could see some of that possibly. I don't think it's off the table.
Maybe so, but I also don't think it's the same game anymore. It's not the old days of using one to promote the other when you had Valerie there when Lewis was fighting for wins, because Lewis and George are not, they're not going to be playing second fiddle to the other until the math dictates it.
No, that's for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I think man, that's hard to say, because Toto knows that they both have the drive still to want to win. And he also knows that George is the future, Lewis is the past. Like it is what it is. It's a numbers thing. So,
Right. I wouldn't say he's still the present, but
well,
George is definitely the future.
right. So, I
So
mean,
you can't
it's
demoralize that and start to hamper that.
it's hard. It's hard to say that, they. I don't know. I think, if that car is really fighting for consistent podiums and maybe better, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we see either them two start to go at each other pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
or you see a lot of Toto intervention.
I don't
And
think it's going to be a ton of intervention, but I do think it's going to be a hard fought battle
mhm,
because, from Toto's perspective, it's not like you had when you had Lewis and Nico, when you had two guys who ascended equally throughout their careers and were at the same point in their career. So you handle it, you can handle that much different. Um, you can't really do that here. It's just one of those things, man, where I feel like you can't put the reins on Russell at all, and you're never going to on Lewis.
mhm,
Like, you just got to let him sort it out, and you just have to be very clear that, hey, as long as y'all don't take each other out, we're good. But the second that you start to play dirty, I'll get involved, and it's going to be whoever out qualifies the other.
mhm.
That's where you'll stay, or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
whatever. Like, if it starts to be an issue, then you have to do something. But I still don't think it's gonna. It would be one of those things where it's you can really put the handcuffs because, one, you're not going to treat Lewis like that, and two, you're not gonna. George's already proven he is your future, so you're not going to compromise that. You're not going to want to put a bad taste in his mouth and make him be like, "Hey, Checo or Christian Horner, whenever Checo's done, I'm coming."
Right.
Screw these guys.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's just going to be one of those things that is another great battle to watch throughout the year is Mercedes versus Mercedes.
It should be.
I would imagine it to be a lot cleaner than what Nico and Lewis were.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like there's going to be that level of toxicity. I don't think that there's any risk of this becoming another Lewis and Nico situation,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think there's a slight risk of it getting to the point where team intervention is going to have to happen.
Right.
Now to what extent, who knows? It might just be a simple reminder like, hey, y'all play nice. Remember, we're in this together. Y'all are free to duke it out, but play nice. Could be as simple as that. Or depending on how things may or may not escalate, you know, the team intervention could follow suit.
Right. Um, here's kind of like on the scale what this year has to be in terms of the big three. Red Bull has a significant penalty that we have not seen. There is no precedent for us to refer to in as to like even what to expect in terms of what kind of
Mm-hmm.
performance uh hampering it's going to do. So Ferrari, as close as they were, has to take advantage of this situation and win
Yeah.
because they were already right there performance wise.
Yep.
Couple little tweaks, and you got yourself a contender anyway.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
this penalty coming, you have to win. You have to keep a gap to Mercedes and, leapfrog Red Bull because of this penalty. Mercedes have to use this to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a blessing that they were able to catch up. That they were able to have this to catch up because, dude, I got to be honest. Like, I feel like cost cap breach or not, Red Bull would have been this kind of freight train no matter what.
Yeah,
So
I do.
they ought to look at this as a blessing that allows them to close a gap, because you and I both know, and everybody that's listening to this knows, that you don't close gaps like that overnight in Formula One. You just don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at Mercedes' last 8 years.
Yep.
When you jumped in advantage like that and it's not a fluke, you don't lose that overnight, man. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
To close up, half a second
Right.
in pace.
Yep. And man, what I started to get into earlier that I said I was going to hold off till we got to Mercedes. One of the things with their pace that we saw, because towards the end of the year was really when we saw some things change with their pace, some of which can absolutely be attributed to just development throughout the year, and they got on top of some of the issues.
Oh, they definitely improved the
The
car.
other thing that stood out was some of those races came in some very high altitudes, and we saw that their car clearly performed better, or I don't know that I should say performed better, was not as hampered by those high altitudes. So the question is them finding the power that they were lacking, was all that just a matter of a tuning thing where they can play around on the computer and kind of resolve some of that? Or was that some fundamental design within the engine that caused that and created that?
I don't think, because that wasn't. Austria is one of the highest tracks that they race at, and they weren't particularly good there.
No, but Austria
They were getting swallowed. Mick Schumacher was passing Lewis Hamilton.
Austria was what, mid
it was middle of the season, but still, like.
Well, I know. That's what I'm
but
getting
like
at.
what
Towards
they were
the end of the season with some of the improvements that they had made throughout the year, and then it was clear that those engines performed better than everybody else did and was able to maintain better power levels comparative to what they showed up with, what they had previously, than a lot of the other teams. So, just looking at that aspect of it performance wise, is that problem going to continue on into this year?
David, I don't think, if you look at it, I really don't know how much of an engine issue it was for Mercedes at all, because when you look at the team, some of their main teams, right? You look at Mercedes, you look at McLaren, Aston Martin. We're not going to count Williams because they're a train wreck for this conversation. Actually, you know what? We can bring him into this conversation because they kind of proved the contrary. They kind of proved my point that it wasn't, because any track that they were, it was high speed. Williams was one of the fastest cars. But all of the other ones, Aston Martin, McLaren, and Mercedes, had massive aerodynamic issues at the beginning of the season. Massive issues. So I don't think you can blame anything on the engine. Like I don't think there's any correlation with that because it was never a reliability issue.
No, there was not.
Those cars were just horrible aerodynamically. So, man, I don't think that one works. I just can't see it because, at the beginning of the year, McLaren wasn't even making enough downforce to induce porpoising.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they were like, whenever we're watching testing, we're like, holy smokes, man, McLaren might be on to something here.
Right.
They don't have any
freaking
porpoising.
got it.
And then when we start seeing real times, it's like, oh my God, they don't even make enough downforce to get there.
Yeah.
Aston Martin's first stab at this car was kind of a train wreck.
Mm-hmm.
They wound up bringing a whole nother car, a third of the way in?
Yeah.
And man, Williams was a disaster everywhere except for in a straight line.
Yeah, until you let it just stretch its legs. Yep. So I mean, yeah, maybe. So,
I think that shows right there that it was not there was no significant gains made engine wise. I mean, Austria is the second highest, only to Mexico City.
Well, I mean, I never said anything about gains.
No,
it was more
I'm just saying,
talking
like,
about the way those engines performed. But now I will backtrack. And
I know initially, but
your
conversation just kind of evolved.
Yeah, but no, your argument of Williams though is very valid, and I honestly had not kind of factored that in and had not thought about it, and that does kind of prove any thought that I had to be null and void, unless it was just because the Williams was so incredibly terrible aerodynamically and had no drag and no downforce that it was able to be that fast. But I mean, hell, we could play the if this and if that game, and maybe this and maybe they just had zero downforce, which is why they were so fast. And you could have put a motor out of a freaking Pinto and they'd have been fast, in a straight line. Yeah, but I mean, what it comes down to kind of wrap Mercedes up is they've got a lot of ground to cover. They made tremendous gains over the season. I think they'll make, my opinion is have made tremendous gains over the wintertime. And yeah, maybe not, at season opener, but I think they will be a threat at the pointy end. Maybe not for wins, but I think definitely for podiums.
Mm-hmm. And look, I'm so conflicted. And I guess it's just because it's Mercedes. Because I feel like with the amount of time that they have to make up, I feel like they should not be next year should be the year that they get there. But like when you see what they like the amount of progress that they made throughout the year last year. But man, like I can't count them out.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we've seen year in and year out, right? I mean, Mercedes is
but we really haven't, because we haven't seen them in this position. Because like when they came in 2010, it was not the same thing. So like this isn't. Like they've never gone through this before. Like they were
it wasn't the same thing. It was the same thing of you kind of don't know. You don't know what to expect, right? Because they may just completely shock you
no,
and
but it
you
wasn't
just
like that
don't
at
know.
all. It wasn't like that at all. It was, but like we're just so accustomed to them being great now that I feel like we even create unrealistic expectations for how fast they can claw back an absurd amount of time in Formula One. When you're going against Ferrari and Red Bull, which some of the newer fans may not think that holds as much water as it actually does.
Mm-hmm.
Because Red Bull won 4 in a row. If you're a Drive to Survive fan and haven't really dug into the history at all, you might not realize that.
Yeah.
You might just look at them as the off team that wins a race here or there. They got really fast drivers. They're kind of wild, and then they finally put it together. But Red Bull has this pedigree. They are
they absolutely do.
They're a juggernaut. Ferrari is the juggernaut.
Mm-hmm.
Make no mistake about it. Mercedes, in the grand scheme of things, is still chasing Ferrari.
Yes.
And, Ferrari's done this, which, they've been here from the beginning. So it's no surprise that, you have ups and downs. You have times where, other teams just nail it. And, you win races here and there. And that's it. But, man, it's just Mercedes should not be able to do it. They should not be able to claw back because, like I said, because Ferrari and Red Bull are not standing still.
Right.
They're also continuing to move forward and make their car even faster than it was last year. And Ferrari, we would assume, and we've been told that they're fixing, the fixes that they made. If they did fix them, they're going to be on Red Bull's level.
Yep.
Because don't misunderstand what I'm saying here when I use the word simple, but it was things that we knew, like watching the race, you see that's your problem. Your problem is tire deg. Okay? I'm in South Louisiana watching the F1 race, and I know that's your problem.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you're just slow and you don't know why. Like you got to try and figure out why I'm slow. Why can I not go as fast as that car? You can go as fast as that car. Your car just kills the tires a lot faster. So we start here, work our way back. It's kind of a simple process.
In F1 engineering terms,
in theory,
it's as far as they're concerned, yes, it's a simple process.
Like now, if you explain to me how to fix that, I'm sure it's not going to sound simple. But in terms of like the reverse engineering of it, it's a much simpler thing than probably what they're accustomed to troubleshooting.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it takes money to fix it because it's related to a very expensive piece.
Yeah.
The floor. The whole floor.
And nothing but the floor.
Right. So, that's all I had to say about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that pretty well sums up expectations for the top three. I think, nonetheless, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be exciting. We know that, regardless of whether it's all 6 drivers, or if it's 4 of them, or if it's 4 of them with the occasional other 2 thrown in the mix. Like it's going to be exciting. We do know that much.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the top 3 is possibly going to have a big shakeup.
I think if nothing
I say
else,
shakeup more so as just, it's going to be back and forth.
for
Shakeup wouldn't
Mercedes,
really be
from
the
a
right term.
Mercedes perspective, I feel like at the minimum, they're going to be legitimate race winning threats at certain tracks. Like maybe you see the track specific race wins this year.
I could get on board with that.
At the minimum, that's
Mm-hmm.
what I feel like they'll be. I'm not saying they won't be there every week. I think it'd be an unbelievable feat in the history of F1 if they are there every week to start just out the gate. But I feel like they'll have those track specific weekends where their car is just working well, it suits them well, and maybe the weather lines up, whatever it may be, and they're fighting for race wins. And it's not a one-off. It may be,
Mm-hmm.
Between the 2 drivers, it may be 4 or 5 different weekends, maybe 4 or 5 wins in the year.
Yeah.
And I think that's the floor for Mercedes this year.
Yeah, I think
it's got to
that's
be. I
that's
think it's got to
accurate.
be, especially towards that back half
Mm-hmm.
where we're starting to see that development timeline that we were talking about kick in.
Yep. Yeah, I
if I'm Mercedes, I'm circling Mexico, Brazil, because they look strong at both of those.
Yep.
I think you're looking at maybe Hungary. Just off the top of my head, I hadn't really looked at it. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. Tracks that they were either strong at or Red Bull maybe struggled at.
Mm-hmm.
Which I found it strange because even though I think Max had that collision happen, I think Max would have probably still won in Brazil. I thought with that long, from turn 12 out in Brazil, that is a long
Mm-hmm.
stretch of just
Yes.
power and speed. And I thought the Red Bulls would be so freaking dominant in that sector that nothing else would really matter, because then you go through the Senna S's and it's back another ginormous straight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I thought Red Bull would just absolutely leave everybody in the dust in sectors 1 and 3. And no matter how fast you were in sector 2, you were never going to pull back, but it didn't really work like that.
The joys of Interlagos.
Dude, I love that track.
Yeah.
It's great. And of course the weather's always an issue there, and that could have played on it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But right. Let's move it down the line. Let's jump into Alpine. I'll start it off with them.
All right.
I think I'm gonna start off the conversation about Alpine with what I think would be a win for them and why, and we'll just kind of snowball it from there. So, in lieu of everything that went on last year, the complete shit show that was to the world, I feel like essentially standing pat and not falling back would be a win for Alpine this year. Because you've had, I mean, just the amount of turmoil inside of that team that went down. I feel like that can't just be affecting your driver situation.
Oh, it goes way deeper.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's got to be everything that went down last year. Like it's going to have some sort of effect on performance.
Oh, it's absolutely going to have an effect on the morale of the entire organization.
Right.
And that's huge.
Yeah.
You kill the morale of that whole team, and that could be crippling. I'll tell you what I think we're going to see out of Alpine this year. Fireworks. With the driver pairing, I think we're going to see fireworks. They already don't like each other. They really very strongly dislike each other. And
I don't know. I saw them two and Charles together on social media the other day.
I saw that.
Some like random thing.
Yeah, I saw that.
Maybe they're trying to patch it up.
Maybe so, but
A little maturity.
I mean, it's also the off season, right? Let's wait till the helmets go back on.
That's true, bro. Because I'll tell you right now, dude, if Ocon pulls some shit like he did on Fernando, on Pierre, bro, I think Pierre's looking to be there long term. It's going to get ugly.
Yeah.
Fernando's at a point in his career where I don't think he gave a shit like long term. If he'd have pulled that on Fernando in 2008,
it'd have been a very, very different response.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Fernando was at a point where he was like, all right, I'm just out of here.
Yeah. I think that driver pairing is going to be one to keep an eye on. For sure. And so you've got a bit of a, I think you're going to have a bit of a battle between them for who is going to call themselves the number one driver, right?
Yep.
Pierre has established himself since returning to AlphaTauri. He has established himself as the lead driver. He has matured. He has improved vastly. He has shown that he can be a leader.
He took control, dude.
Yeah.
100%. Like he ran that team.
Coming in
from the second he got back.
Yeah. Coming into Alpine, he's now the new guy. Ocon is going to have a sense of
but
right? Like
I don't know if that matters really.
Well, it's going to matter
in terms of Pierre because Pierre, I think he's developed in his character enough to where, or he's to a point where that is just who he is now.
Well, yeah, and that's fine and all, but Ocon is going to have a sense of entitlement to that number one driver.
Absolutely.
Because he's been there, right?
Absolutely.
So
however,
we are without a doubt.
He does not know how to operate.
No, he does not. He absolutely does not.
That's what's going to be great about it because yeah, he has the entitlement, but he's never really earned it. Like you could say he beat Alonso last year, and that's cute and that's a funny story. But Alonso had shit luck. Alonso had Valtteri Bottas Mercedes luck.
Yeah.
Last year when it came to reliability.
Well, and look, regardless of the results, we all know that Ocon was second fiddle to Alonso, right? It's just how it is. So Ocon has never been in the position of being the number one guy, being the leader. but he's going to feel like that title is his and he's going to want it. And Pierre is just going to command that. And it's going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that will be very interesting, but I also think just from a performance of the car, not from the drivers, I think it would be a massive win if they essentially just stay where they are in terms of performance.
Yeah.
I don't mean in P4. I mean just kind of don't take too many steps back. Like, I mean, it was so close with McLaren, you know, P4, P5. You just got to stay in that battle. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like,
You
yeah,
just
you
have to
came out on
stay.
top this
You just
time,
have to
but
stay in the fight for best of the rest.
right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Front of the
As long as
midfield.
you
You
don't
gotta
drop
be in
off.
that fight. Like, don't fall back to where, you know, points wise, where Alpha and Aston were last year.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think we can bring McLaren into this. I think, you have to. You gotta stay because I don't know, man. I feel like McLaren's downplaying a lot, and that typically says good things. I feel like for everybody except for Mattia, when they start downplaying a lot of stuff, I feel like that's usually a good sign, right?
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think that kind of suits Zach Brown as well. You know, I don't think he's gonna be the one to come out and either blow smoke or just give away all of his I don't want to say secrets, but any confidence that he may have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like you're kind of on to something there with them downplaying it may actually be a good indication. And for reference, here is the car that McLaren has released. They seem to have lost about 40% of their papaya on the car and just replaced it with a flat black.
I don't know why.
I do not know
I
why.
cannot understand it, dude. Like, make that whole freaking car papaya.
Yeah. Yep. Like, dude, that papaya and whatever the color name for that golf blue is, it goes so freaking well together. Put more of it everywhere.
They don't have golf as a sponsor anymore.
No, but that's that golf blue.
Not really. That's a little more Google blue than golf. Golf's a little more pastel blue.
That's pretty pastel.
I disagree. I feel like that's more beach.
Well, it's blue. We'll just stick with that.
Yeah. It's funny when we're talking about colors on an F1 car, we can see variants in colors. But when they get put on a wall and they're like, okay, which one of these do you like?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's different.
They all look the same. Yeah. You're not wrong.
So, look, I mean, let's just kind of roll this conversation into McLaren along with Alpine. And I want to bring another car into this conversation eventually here. But I think if you're McLaren, like obviously you had some deficiencies last year that held you back behind Alpine. One of them being one of your drivers just did not jive with the car for whatever reason. You're bringing in a rookie. He's supposed to be the next thing, the next Leclerc, the next Russell. That's all great hype. He's done great at the lower levels. Let's see if it translates.
Yeah, I mean, at the end
Let's
of it,
see
though,
if he can
he's
hang
still
with
a
Lando
rookie.
in Lando. Let's see if he can hang in Lando's ballpark.
Yeah,
What I want to see from McLaren.
That's a big ask.
No. I don't mean all the time, but like my
Just
next statement.
Get there.
My next statement was going to be McLaren has to have higher peaks this year. They had some really low floors, but they got to raise those peaks, man. They got to raise those ceilings. You're still, I feel like McLaren's still at a point where they're going to be up and down, up and down, up and down pretty substantially. But you got to raise that floor and higher that ceiling.
Yeah.
I feel like they kind of did raise the floor throughout the season, but they got to get that ceiling higher. I mean, Lando had one podium, and it was kind of a fluke. It was really early on. What was it? Imola.
Yes.
I mean, Charles spun it away.
Yeah. Yeah. Dude, I tell you what though, I'm very, very curious.
And that was all wet.
Yeah. I'm very curious to see how much of a detriment losing Andreas Seidel is going to end up being to McLaren. He was a very, very large part of that team's progression back, and they were headed. They slowly, but they were headed in a good direction as a whole, as a team, as a culture, as
I'm gonna be honest. I think a ton of that is Zach Brown, and man, like they took a pretty sharp fall from where they were in 21.
They did.
I mean, they were the team that going into last year, everybody was like, dude, McLaren's ready to be back.
Yeah, and they definitely missed some marks
with it was a sharp fall.
But just kind of looking in general, the path back, they were making good progress and they were getting there. And I from everything I've read, man, Andreas Seidel was a large part of that. Now, I'm not trying to take anything away from Zach Brown. I know we've had this conversation on here before about Zach Brown, and I think we both equally agree at how awesome that dude really is. But I think Andreas Seidel played a large role in that. And regardless of what the trajectory was up to this point, right? Take all of that away. You had a plan in place that he was going to be there till 26. And then kind of out of nowhere, this wrench gets thrown in. And this is a massive wrench. You're talking team principal.
Mm-hmm.
This is no small thing. He did decide, but just the way the cards all fell with Fred leaving Alpha, Sauber and all that Andreas made the move now. I mean, that's huge. Granted,
no doubt.
Andrea Stella, the new team principal, it's not like he's some newbie. The dude is incredible. and he is very well capable of the job. But you got thrown in at not the greatest time to prepare, and it's just, I feel like we're gonna see some issues from Andreas's departure. Although
I'm sure there won't be setbacks.
it was a planned departure, it was not planned for another 3 years.
Right.
So
However, the upside to that is it still didn't affect who you had in line to replace them.
correct.
So like it would be different if, like, let's say you have these behind closed doors meetings and, like, okay, Andreas is leaving in 20, well, I guess at the end of 25 to go
Yeah.
to Audi. And let's say Christian Horner wasn't married to Red Bull. He was just their guy at the time who built it up the second time and doing great and all this. You have this behind closed door meeting like, listen, he's leaving at this time. So work your contract to where I'm signing you. You're going to be the next McLaren team principal to bring us back. And you have this whole thing lined up, and this throws this would have thrown a massive wrench in that kind of plan.
Mm-hmm.
Where you had a succession plan, but it wasn't from within your organization.
Right.
That would have been catastrophic.
Yes.
Because then
without
it's
a
like,
doubt.
okay, so I got to get some chicken shit in here for 2 years that I can fire whenever it's time for this other guy to come in. Because I don't want to break that deal. But then what if this guy does good? Like, it just opens yourself up to so many issues.
Oh yeah, but I'm sure, I'm sure there was. I mean, we're talking F1 teams, right? There, damn good and well, there was a 3-year plan put in place.
I'm sure, but you know
Right.
what? I
And
don't believe that plan would have been put in place. And I truly believe this, that plan would not have been put in place when it was, had Andrea Stella not been ready now. Because you don't make that arrangement with a guy who, like, he's not really ready yet, but give him another 2 years and he'll be there. You don't make that. That's not your plan. If that's the case.
No, you're right, but you've also got to look at what position Stella is vacating. And now I'm sure it was the same exact scenario where the guy that was set to succeed him was probably already capable. But the fact of the matter is that, now that guy, along with Stella, is being thrown in with much less time to prepare. And now it's just kind of sudden, right?
Right. But he's still
Like,
there.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Is this going to be some like catastrophic thing with them?
That's something that we didn't mention either. So this is a better problem to have than what Mercedes is going through, where all these people are departing and going to other places. Aston Martin, Red Bull, Williams, at least, like, okay, Andreas Seidel left. Andreas Stella takes his spot, and the roles, just keep, you bump people up and you just fill the line, right? But essentially, all of those positions are still there for that next guy who's getting that bump, the guy who you replace is still in the next office to you.
Yeah, I mean, it was all promote from within.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, though. Like, if the guy who took Andrea Stella's place has an issue, he gets up and he goes walk around the corner and he says, "Hey, dude, like I got this going on. What do you think about it? You know, how would you approach this? Blah 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 blah, whatever." And you probably wind up in the same place. You know, maybe it winds up being a little better because now you have more input from a guy who maybe wouldn't have had as much say before and came up with the right thing. I'm just saying, like, I don't feel like McLaren's situation loses you as much as like maybe what Mercedes is going through.
No, and like I never was trying to portray that it was going to be this big catastrophic loss and detriment, but it is going to play a role. It is going to cause a setback to them at a time when they do not need any setbacks. They need nothing but progression forward. It nonetheless is going to cause some slowdown and some setback, none of which they can afford right now.
Man, I just don't know. Like at this point with McLaren, with where they're at, I don't know how much of a setback would be noticed. You follow? Like,
I mean, I see what you're saying, but
because like they're okay,
there,
like their high
there's no
last year
way
was
to
a
know.
podium. Their high last year was a podium, a third place. Their low was DFL. So essentially, if you tighten that up, it's a net gain. You know, like
Yeah.
it wasn't a DFL because it was like, you know, we had a bunch of crazy things happen and you know whatever. It was you were DFL because you were slower than everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it honestly, if this was going to happen, I think not it's not that bad of timing, really, with the way that with the way they were able to fill the roles. You know, it's not like he dropped the bomb on you and you had to scramble and hire somebody. Like, it was like, okay, like, yeah, that sucks.
Well,
It's a
yeah. I mean,
bombshell, but, you know, this guy's ready. All our guys are ready. Like, it expedites the plan. And, you know, we got the people. So, hey, you know, secretary to Zach Brown, prepare the statement and let's go live in an hour.
yeah, and I mean,
So like it's not like it threw you like
there's
into
no,
scramble mode for people.
yeah, but I mean, there's no argument that it's the end of the world. It's just they need all progression forward is
Mhm.
all I'm getting at.
And
They
I
need
guess I'm just
nothing but
trying to I
forward.
guess I'm just of the belief that after what like the fall from 21 to 22, I guess in performance, I guess I just don't feel that like it's that much of a loss. You know, just the same way I feel about Mattia. I think Mattia was the right person for the right time, and it ran its course, and that's what he can do.
Hmm.
He was never going to get them any further, and I think maybe Andreas Seidel was that for McLaren. You know, they were in a absolutely disastrous place when he took over and brought them up, but then you know had a significant drop. Maybe you know maybe that's just what it was. Maybe that's what it would have been.
Maybe. Yeah.
I guess that's more of my feeling with McLaren is like they weren't on the verge of, like this steady upward trajectory. Like they came back, but then they had a big fall.
Well, they did, but what was
And that
really
was
going to
all
be
under Andreas Seidel's watch.
But I mean, dude, if you look at like you were saying, if you look at their low and their high of last year, they were on a trajectory up. They had a bit of a setback, but from where they were to where they are, that's still, even with that setback, it's still a net upwards trajectory. So yeah,
No, I was talking about
they had a bit of
I was talking about where when Seidel took over in like 2018 or whatever.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying though. From when he took over to where they were when he left, they were going upwards. Yes, they had a drop.
Well, yeah, I mean it's a net
it was
gain.
still a net gain.
No, it's not. It's a net gain if you look at it from 2018. If you draw a dot on a graph from 2018 to 2022, leaving out everything in between, it's a net gain. But
that's exactly what I'm saying.
Right, but if you put each year in between that in there, it's not a full net gain because you went up in 19, up in 20, up again in 21, and then down in 22.
Right. But where you went down
from
to,
18, but you can't look at it like that.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you have to look at it year over year.
What you didn't let me finish was what was really going to be the tell-all as to where this trajectory was going. Was that Andreas's max? Like, was that all he was going to be able to take them to? Was how they came out this year, how they did this year? Because yeah, the new regs and everything, they had a fall off. But what was going to really tell everything was where was he able to continue that upward trajectory moving forward? Because you're always going to have a setback. You're going to have a drop off. Yeah, it was a pretty significant one. But was he able to climb back from that and keep going up? That this year would have been the tell for, was it a Matthias situation where like this is just about all he's going to be able to do for us or not, but we won't know.
Personally, I think it might have been a blessing in disguise.
I mean, I don't know if I think it's a good thing or not, to be 100% honest. Like I honestly don't have an opinion on that. I think we're going to see somewhat of a setback from them. My whole thing with this is this is going to cause a bit of a setback. How large or how small is yet to be seen at a time when they don't need any more is all I'm getting at.
Let me ask you this. How will the setback be measured if, let's say, Piastri has a much better feeling for this car and there's not this gargantuan size gap between car A and car B, and McLaren winds up scoring more points this year than they did last year.
Well, again, I mean, I think that comes back to it's a net gain. Regardless of what happened outside of his points, whether they make strategic errors or whether there's just some, managerial type errors or whatever it might be. If at the end of the season they score more points, it's a net gain, point blank.
Right, but I mean, I'm saying
end all be all.
Yeah, but
right. And I think,
no, hold on, stop. Let me say this because it needs to go right here. The points, yeah, it makes a difference for where they are now. But if that's if that's all it is that has no bearing on where they're trying to get. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a net gain if that's where they're trying to get. Like, for where they're trying to get. Because they want to be back at the front fighting for wins. So it's not a net gain if the car didn't get any better, but the drivers are just collectively better.
That is exactly a net gain.
I disagree, man, because you still have this ceiling that's never going to allow you to go any further.
But now you have the drivers that can take it there, and
I know,
because
but
so like
that's not what I'm saying though. Like, we're talking about the car and the technical director and the team principals from the car aspect. Like,
well, that's what we were talking about.
And then
but you brought the drivers and the points into it.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is, like, how do you measure, like, how do you measure that if, because I think that's what's going to happen, but how do you measure that? Like, how do you still call, because it's, in my opinion, it's not a net gain if your car is still exactly what it was, but your driver just picked it up to where, like, optics wise
of a net gain.
it looks like it.
The team as a whole would have gained if they scored more points, regardless of how
obviously
or why. So that is a net gain.
I know what but you understand what I'm saying, right?
I do, but you're saying it wrong because that is still a net gain.
Okay, it's a net gain for points, but it's not a net gain like in terms of.
It's a net gain for.
It's not a net gain in terms of your gap to the front.
It's not a net gain.
What if you score more points, but
for the car development, it's not a net gain. Maybe for
right, but that's the whole thing. Like, that's what matters. That's where they're
talking the
trying
team.
To get. This isn't.
If you're talking the team as a whole,
we're not talking about AlphaTauri.
If you're talking the team as a whole, more points is more points at the end of it. Then you've succeeded. Maybe you didn't succeed in every aspect that you wanted to, but as a whole, you succeeded and you progressed.
I can't see it that way. And you know what I'm saying, and you're just sticking like this just to do it.
No.
But
no.
That I don't agree with that.
I know what you're saying, but you're trying to say that's not a net gain when that is the exact definition of a net gain. You have ups and downs within, but at the end of it all, you come out better than you were before.
So you can say that, yeah, it's a net gain if Piastri is better than what Danny Rick was, and the car is exactly what it was last year.
Are we talking about the team as a whole, or are we just talking about the car itself? Because you started talking about the car and the team.
That's one in and of itself, because if you look at where does McLaren have aspirations to be, like, that's what you have to put it into perspective of.
Back
like
at the front,
Alfa Romeo, Haas, Williams can say whatever the hell they want. They're never going to be that again. AlphaTauri, they will never be front-running teams.
Mm-mm.
They just won't.
No.
As the way they stand right now, they will not be front-running teams. Out of the people that aren't, McLaren, Alpine, and Aston Martin have legitimate ambitions to getting there.
Yeah.
Right? I think all three of them have potential to do it. I think maybe one of them might get there. Just if you kind of look at how F1 goes, right? How long they stay there, who knows? But I think maybe one of them will get there maybe even at a time. right? Like maybe 1 year it's McLaren, maybe 1 year it's Alpine, whatever. I think out of the three of them, McLaren has the best chance to stay there long term. But putting it in that's the kind of perspective I'm talking about, right? When you look at the history of McLaren, where they are, it's kind of similar to a Williams history. However, they still have the capability to be there. They're still of that caliber. So keeping that in mind, I don't feel like it would be that much of a positive outlook, or at the end of the season, I don't think it would be that much of a positive if, yeah, they scored more points just because Piastri's better. Obviously, that would be a positive because, hey, we got our drivers in line for the next however many years because they're so freaking young. But overall, I think it would be a huge problem if your car is still not better.
Well, I mean, yeah, that goes
That's
without
what I'm
saying.
saying.
But because if your car doesn't get any better, then you need to go to your technical director and be like, bro, what the fuck? Like, you've had all year and the car has not gotten any better. Thank God we have a better driver pairing this year. But if you score more points at the end of this year, if you score more points than you did last year, what does that mean? It means possibly leapfrogging Alpine. So you've gained a spot in the constructors, and you've also secured yourself thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars more. So that is all progression. And you know as well as I do that progression is in F1 back to the top or to the top for the first time, whatever, is small. So every little victory is a victory. Every little bit of progression is a victory. It's not, yeah, they have aspirations and have the potential to be back at the front. It's not going to be next year or the year after, you know? So if they score more points this year and possibly finish one place better in the constructors, even if the car did not get any better, which is a whole separate problem on its own, nonetheless, it's still a win. It's still progression. As a whole, as a collective team, it is progression and it's a win.
I would just have a hard time looking at it like that.
Now, look, there's still, like I said, there's still
I'll
a
never
separate
look at it like that.
conversation. There's still a separate conversation you have with the technical side of things, but you've got so many moving pieces. You've got driver pairings, you've got the strategist, you've got the technical side. Within the technical side, you've got the powertrain stuff, you've got the aero stuff, you've got whatever all the different departments are. So you've got to look at it as a larger picture. Okay, maybe one department did not progress or progress as much as you wanted, but if another department, your driver pairings, progressed significantly, then it's a win. You can't, if you've got 10 departments, you can't honestly expect every one of them to grow and progress at the same rate year after year after year. There are going to be times where one progresses more than the other. That's business. Like you can't have unrealistic expectations of it. You have
Sure,
to
but
take
I feel like you
any
have to
bit of
look.
growth as growth and success.
I feel like you have to look at it like, okay, we made a change at the driver position. That's automatic points because Danny Rick scored a third of the points as Lando Norris. So I feel like if you're making that change, rookie or not, you feel like he's a better option. That should buy you. I mean, honestly, I don't think there's any reason why any F1 pairing like short of some crazy bad luck, Valtteri Bottas should be scoring more than double the amount of points that their teammate has. Obviously, when you get down to the the bottom, sure, that can happen. Like one race could offset that.
3 versus 6 points.
Right. Or, something like that. Like, even like, you happen to win a war of attrition in one race and skirt up to 7th place.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that equals your total and you blow your teammate away. But
Well, I mean,
whatever.
hell, what was it? De
But
Vries scored triple the amount of
yeah,
points that Latifi did.
yeah. Whatever it was. No, they were equal by the end.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
But, like, all right. You had Max scored 454. Checo scored 305. That's a massive disparity right there.
Mm-hmm.
Leclerc had 308. Sainz had 246. Sainz had an ungodly amount of bad luck in the first third of the season,
Yeah.
I would say. A lot of stuff that was out of his control. A lot of freak things that kind of happened. But even still, that's not terrible for a number 1 and number 2 situation. George and Lewis with 35 apart. And then you get to Lando, Danny Rick. 122 to 37.
Mm-hmm.
Esteban Ocon and Alonso, they were 11 apart.
Yeah.
Bottas and Joe, where's he at? Okay, I mean that's a massive disparity right there. And but you're talking about a seasoned vet versus a rookie. Like a legit seasoned vet versus a
Mm-hmm.
rookie. Valtteri killed him. I think you saw in his rookie year, I think you saw some pretty good peaks for Joe. But anyway, you get the point here. Like, you could go. There's no bigger disparity, I guess, percentage wise, is if you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like just about any decision they would have made is going to buy themselves a significant amount more points.
I mean, it should, hence the reason they made the decision.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. So, like, in theory, I can't call it a win if, you theoretically you score more points. Like, they scored 150 something, 160 last year. If they score 200, I mean, maybe, it looks a lot better. It looks like it's a big positive, but
I mean, dude, you have to look at that as a win, because if you don't, then that just tells all the 1,000 people that work for your team that the insane amount of hard work and progression that they did make, you're not happy with it, and it was all for nothing. Like, you've got to take progression as it is. Progression is progression. Now you can have conversations about, you had hopes for a little bit more, or this was the goal and we didn't quite meet it. We gotta get there. We gotta do better. Blah blah blah. But you can't. I mean, you can't just downplay the growth and the progression that is there.
Agree to disagree on that one, my dude.
Yeah, well, I mean, we could go back and forth on that one all night. So yeah, we'll leave that one as a agree to disagree. So, all right, I'll tell you what. Why don't we put a button on this, and we will call this the season preview part 1, and then we're already a little bit over 2 hours in, and we will come back next week with the rest of the field in the season preview part 2. And we will get into Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, Haas, AlphaTauri, and Williams. And we'll dive into them a little bit, and that'll give us a little bit more time to dive into them and not have to try to rush through them.
Yeah. Plus, all the cars will have been unveiled by then.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a couple surprises with one of the 3 left.
Yeah, we could touch back on some of that if needed. So, all right. Well, let's wrap this one up. Call this a night, and then we will come back next week, same time, same place, and do the season preview part 2. So I had a quote to end this one with, but I'm not going to, because that quote was fitting for ending the season preview. So I will wait for that one until next week. So I'm going to do this one quoteless. We'll just because I had no backup prepared. So we will just leave this one at that, unless you've got some quote readily available that you want to throw out here.
I saw a video today of when David Coulthard was talking, and they showed Christina Aguilera, and he was like, "Oh, look, there's Christina Aguilera acting like she has an interest in Formula One." When she race, looking at the cars going by. Look, that was funny. He said it on the international broadcast.
He sure did. Yep. That was good. That was good. All right. So again, that'll wrap up tonight. Appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we will look forward to wrapping this up next week. So until then, y'all wait for those next few cars to get released, and we'll get back into it. So
Later.
see y'all.